Hi, everybody. Welcome back post-Pesach. I'm so sad to say that since we met last time, anti-Semitism has only exploded even more, although we've also seen some trying to contain it, to address it. It's being recognized very sadly for Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, which was 2 days ago on Monday. There was, terrible, really just awful contempt. I believe it was at Auschwitz or March of the Living, and Jews were just treated really horribly and really desecrating the memory of the Holocaust. We are returning to our study of Megillat Esther, Esther's scroll, and about not only anti-Semitism, but also where anti-Semitism figures in the Megillah, and learning different midrashim and hearing what people have to say as well. So I invite you to come back to chapter 3. You may remember last time that I read the letter that's in the midrash, the letter that Haman sent out. If you remember that, it was that letter with the fake news, which sounded so similar to what we go through today. And I read that from this book, which is Eliyahu Kitov's book, Sefer Toda'ah, the book of our heritage. I think it's an excellent book where he collects midrashim and halachot and minagim, customs and laws and midrashim. And he puts them all together according to the months of the year. So you come to a new month, any holiday that's in that month, any fast day, anything that happens, it's in here. And he does a really, really nice job. He just goes in, say, in the month of Adar, which is when Purim is. So you may remember that he quoted, I'm just going to get you snippets, Haman's letter to all the people in the provinces in the name of King Ahasuerus. Let it be known to you, that there's one man, the greatest of all. He's among the greatest generations. His name is Haman. He makes a minor request of you. There's a people among us who is the lowliest of all people, but they are arrogant. So already labeling the Jews. So, the way you label people is the way people hear it. They seek our harm. Their mouths are filled with curses against the king. There's no basis for that. The same way there's no basis for a blood libel, but somebody made it up and then other people hear it. What is the curse with which they will curse us? And then they do quote things from our, Torah or Tanakh and take it out of context and spin the narrative. So, for example, come and see what they did to poor Pharaoh. When they went down to Egypt, he welcomed them cordially, settled them in the best part of the land. He fed them in the years of famine, gave them the best food. He had a palace to build. They did the building. Oh, wait a minute. You forgot to mention they were slaves. Nevertheless, he could not prevail against them, as if the Jews rose up and tried to conquer Pharaoh. They can't. And anyway, it takes verses out of our Exodus reading in Shemot, takes them out of context and applies them in a way to make it seem as if poor Amalek, remember who Amalek was, who was his grandfather, great ancestor. Amalek is the one who attacked the Jews, the weak. So he says, see what they did to Amalek when he came to wage war against them. And then it totally tries to justify that it was all the Jews' fault, basically. So anyway, we read that letter. I want to continue with a different midrash today, but first I'm going to finish with you, hopefully, Perek Gimel, the 3rd chapter. We are up to Pasuk Yud Aleph, verse 11. We're up to verse 11. Okay. Oh, just remember, chapter 3 is where Haman comes on the scene, Haman. And just reminding you that in the previous verses, Haman comes to the king. Oh, what happens? Mordechai doesn't bow down. Remember that? Mordechai doesn't bow down. We spoke about that for a little while. Why might he not bow down? Was it the right thing to do? Was it the wrong thing to do? And other places where people have defied and went against the royal decree or the grain. And then Haman is so angry when he hears that Mordechai is one of the Jewish people that he decides not just to retaliate against Mordechai. He could have just punished Mordechai because Mordechai was going against the edict of the king. The king said everybody has to bow down to Haman, just like they bow down to the king. But there's also midrash that says that Mordechai had an exemption. Why would he have the exemption? Anybody remember?
Because he saved the king's life.
Right, because he saved the king's life. And he showed allegiance to the king by saving his life, by reporting on Bigtan Bateresh, who plotted to kill the king. And so there's a midrash that says he actually had an exemption. But in any case, Haman decides to retaliate against all the Jews. So he goes to Achashverosh. He doesn't say who it is. He just says, oh, there's a nation that's scattered. I remember, and their religion is different. They don't follow the king's rules. Now, there was no basis for that. No reason to assume that they didn't follow the king, but he says that's what they do. And therefore, the king should not keep them in his land. So if it pleases you, let him write a letter, la'abdam, to destroy them. La'abed means to lose something, but la'abed in this context means lose their lives. And, just on the side, just to make it, sweeten the pot, 10,000 talents of silver, this is in verse 9, are just going to end up their way into the king's treasuries, the king's coffers. So he bundles this together in a verse. And immediately, it's interesting because the king didn't ask who they are. King, isn't that strange? I can imagine. Does that make sense? He's just totally trusting Haman. Seems like wink, wink. We know exactly who we're talking about. The king took off his signet ring and gave it to Haman. And now we're up to verse 11. Vayomer hamelech le'Haman, hakesef natun lach. No, actually, you can keep the money, which is really interesting. Since when does Achashverosh turn down wealth or money? Like, what does he gain by that? Natun lach v'ha'am lasot bo katov be'einecha. So you use the money. I don't actually need your money. You do whatever feels good to you. Everybody with me on that? Okay, so I want to read to you a parable that's in the Midrash. There were once two farmers. One had this is in Megillah in the Gemara, quotes this. One had a mountain of earth in his field and one had a deep pit. The owner of the earth thought, oh, I would love to pay this man to permit me to dump my earth into this pit. On the other hand, the owner of the pit thought, I would for sure pay this guy to fill my pit with earth because, right, each one of them would then be level. Meeting personally, the owner of the pit offered to pay for the earth. The owner of the earth responded immediately, it is all yours, take it without cost and fill up your pit. So he gets him to do the work. So first of all, before I go into how they explain the mashal, what would be the nimshal? How do you say nimshal? Takeaway? I don't know how you say it. When you have a fable and then there's I don't know how to say it in English. I'm sorry.
Moral to the story. A moral to the story.
A moral. Thank you. Perfect. Yes. So this is the moral of the story. In other words, it's not that there really were two farmers, one with a mountain of earth and one with a pit, but it's as if there were. So first of all, any thoughts about why this story would be used to describe Haman coming to the king and offering to pay? I mean, that's what we read, that he comes to the king and says, there is a nation, they don't listen to you and they should be destroyed. And by the way, I want to give you 10,000 talents of silver. And the king says, do what you like. I don't even need your money. Any thoughts? Yeah, please, Anne.
Well, it's just the English translation where it says, do with it as you see fit, which means I kind of want you to get rid of the Jews, but I'm going to look the other way. And therefore, then I don't have to take any responsibility for slaughtering all these people.
Really nice interpretation. And I feel like that goes really nicely with the parable, meaning they're both getting their wish filled. And as a matter of fact, it goes even better because the mountain of earth is saying, oh, you do the dirty work, right? Oh, you want to pay me? I'll be so magnanimous. You don't have to pay me. Take it, do everything for free, get my earth for free as long as you'll do the work. So that actually fits really, really, really nicely. Anybody else have a thought? So it was so interesting because that was similar. I don't think I went as far as you did, and you took it even one step further, this idea of I'll look the other way, which fits really well. But it's just interesting. I just want to read to you what they say the nimshal is. Undoubtedly, Achashverosh and Haman both hated the Jewish people with a passion. Now, when we say undoubtedly, we know that there are different ways to read the Megillah. That is the way we're choosing to read it now. And it certainly seems like it, because no matter what, Achashverosh was fine killing the Jews. Even if it's not written in the Megillah, I just can't imagine that he didn't ask Haman, even though it's not written. Really, is it really possible he didn't say, could you just tell me the name? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. So maybe it's not in the Megillah, but I imagine they had a longer conversation. I just imagine that. That's all I'm saying. But undoubtedly, Achashverosh and Haman both hated the Jewish people. However, they differed as to what was the best way to destroy them. I liked this. I wasn't 100% sure how it went with the Nimshal, but I thought that this made a lot of sense to me, because remember, Haman really wanted to destroy, like Hitler, like just get rid of all the Jews. That's literally what he wanted. He wanted to kill all the Jews. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the 127, from 1 to 127, whatever rising, make them all go to heaven, right? Like something like that. So it's pretty good. Don't quote me on that one, please. But they differed about the best way to destroy them. Achashverosh, so we could say he fell in love with Esther. But in the end, he appoints Mordechai. Remember at the end of the story, he appoints Mordechai to be the second only to the king. And Mordechai and Esther get to run things. So it doesn't feel like Achashverosh, it feels like Achashverosh would be okay sort of this way or this way. But what would be his goal if he doesn't want to destroy, and we assume he hates Jews, or he hates the fact that Jews are different, or that Jews have their own religion that didn't necessarily hold him, as the God or whatever it is. What do you think his goal might be by bringing in Mordechai and having Esther in the palace? Any thoughts before I read it? It would be a different way to kind of destroy the Jews.
Assimilation?
Yeah, assimilation, exactly. So it's also interesting to me because Jews have very often felt and acted very, very assimilated, yet this didn't actually help. There were always people, I mean, many, many Jews are assimilated in America. That doesn't seem to make any difference for anti-Semitism. Assimilated in Germany, and another they thought they were part, and yet they were set off differently. So the intent of the parable is to reveal the profound ideological differences between Achashverosh and Haman. Achashverosh took the mountain philosophy, meaning raising up high. He elevated the Jews to important government positions and invited them to festive meals. Surely they would assimilate and relinquish their Jewish identity. Haman pursued the pit philosophy. The Jews were to be broken, physically degraded, oppressed, and killed so that ultimately they would cease to exist. To bring his plan to fruition, he offered the king money to physically kill every member of the Jewish people. Achashverosh told them, they are yours for free. Do with them as you wish. Now, I'm not sure exactly how that follows the parable, because they agreed to kind of level the ground. Sorry, I have to get something to drink. I apologize. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll be right back. Right. So going back to where we were, I actually think that Anne's description fits it really well, but I like adding this idea of two different ways of getting rid of them also. Like you could imagine, in a way, raising them high means the mountain, right? But what happens in the end? The idea being they'll be assimilated means that they're the same as everybody else. So it makes sense that this would be broken down in the end and filling the pit. So you could take it in different directions, but they all pretty much end up with the same thing. Okay. Yud Aleph, what else? Page 87, I have something here. No, wrong. All right, I think we said that what happened to the 10,000 talents? Yeah, please.
Wouldn't the king prefer assimilation rather than killing? The Jews could always be there as workers, as slaves. Why kill them? Let them. I
So you tell me.
think he would prefer assimilation.
So you tell me.
I mean, that would be my gut, that try to get them.
No,
to
I'm
a-
not I agree with you, but then how do you explain that he's willing to kill them? How do we understand that? That's where these ideas of anti-Semitism come from. Because as you said, it makes more sense. He knew that they were wise. He knew that they had what to offer. And yet he was willing to just go along with Haman and have them be physically killed. So it's like, you know what? I'm willing to get rid of them either way, he's saying. You want to do the dirty work for me, as Anne said? Great. If not, I'll try it another way. They're both fine for me. At least that's what it seems, Ruby. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying the text says that he agrees and he did issue an edict. I see the pain on your face.
I mean, because who would in future do the bulk of work and then the land, if that were the case, if he got his will, if he got that way.
Correct, but here we go. Now read 12. So in the first month on the 13th day, that's by the way, the 13th day of Nisan. Remember, Nisan is considered the first month according to Torah counting. Anybody remember why Nisan is the first month according to Torah counting?
Beginning of the Hagim.
Yes, but why? Good. Take it one step further.
Because Hashem said this month will be for you.
Correct. Rosh Chodeshim, it'll be the head. No, that's correct that he says that, but that God says that. Anne, did you want to add to that?
I was just,
Oh, you just muted yourself.
the barley, the spring harvest.
That's nice too. So I think that this is an easy way to remember it. That's my suggestion. Rosh Hashanah Tishrei is the birthday of the world. Nisan is the birthday of the Jewish people.
Right.
So because the Jewish people, so it really goes along with what Helen said, it's the first holiday, but there's more to it than that. It actually becomes the birthday. And that's the way I remember it for myself. So in the 13th of the month, which is 2 days before Pesach, what happens? There was written according to all that Haman had commanded. Now let's just see what he says. Oh, El Medina Medina, to all the different provinces, Sarei Ha'am, the ministers, Am Ba'am for each one. Medina Medina Kichtav, everybody got it written in their language, and every nation according to their tongue. In the name of the king Ahasuerus, it was written and signed and sealed with the ring, with the signet ring of the king. And what did it say? And the letters were sent by runners to all the provinces, lahashmid, laharog, uleabed, to destroy, to kill, and they use here to exterminate, which is not wrong. So Ruby, I agree with you, but then maybe you can tell me what do you imagine might have been going through the king's head that he would agree to send this letter out?
It's a great question.
That's a great question, what Ruby posed.
And it took no time to encourage Ahasuerus to, it's frightening. He just, like
How
you said,
quickly?
he
How
did.
quickly, right?
Yeah,
Now,
without
like
even
today,
asking. Yeah,
boom.
yeah, okay.
Somebody planted a seed and boom, anti-Semitism just explodes everywhere.
Mhm.
Oh.
And-
Maybe he was paranoid after the plot to potentially kill him, and Haman was successful in twisting his thinking and saying, just the way Hitler was able to do
Yeah.
his public relations and blame the Jews. And Ruby makes an interesting point. Like, why didn't Hitler just enslave all the Jews? Why exterminate them? There's a interesting parallel when she said that I'm thinking to this period. And maybe you want to explore that, because why did they exterminate and not enslave them?
Like they kind of enslaved them, but the work camp, I mean, they were death camps. So it's not like they were really for work. Right. Why not keep them low like Paro did for a long time with the slavery? What is it? I think that's something, it's really hard. Like it hurts to talk about it. What is it about killing, just getting rid of a people who, like, we're the same, we have same physiology, we're all born b'tselem Elokim. What is it that, one second,
It's a
busy,
problem that
be
you
it-
really can't handle. Very often you act impulsively and you just want to dismiss it and get rid of it. But it's still
just get rid of it. I don't want to
It
deal
still
with it.
seems pretty extreme.
I mean, it's genocide. That's
It really is. Those three words are,
ethnic cleansing and there
But the
there
king
are
should
other groups that have had
the king would have
genocide.
second thoughts, though. You know,
Vivian, what do you want to add?
If they looked upon the Jews as people who will not bow down to Haman and accept the kings and information and all that, they were very dangerous. They could destroy the kingship actually, if he lets them get away with it. So he looked at them as being really, really dangerous
Hmm.
if he allowed them to continue, because they seem to have a different approach to what his view of his land and his people and all that. And so he had to get rid of them in the most in the most powerful way, which is to murder them. That's the best way to get rid of people.
Wow. Thank
I-
you, Vivian. Wow. Yeah, and
I'm channeling Rabbi Sachs because I am obsessed with reading many of his books and his
Like Rabbi
philosophy. When you're in when tribes and people are having hard times economically, or where they don't feel like they belong to a society to build together, maybe if Ahasuerus' empire was so broad and so vast, by killing the Jews, he thought it might have been a tactic to unify the world that he controlled by, I see an analogy to the explosion of anti-Semitism. I don't know. Maybe it's the way that
wow.
he unified his empire by
Against something, rallying against something, like what we're seeing on college campuses.
but it's also the state of the mind of the people throughout all these empires, whatever their problems were, if there were famines, or it's like when people become disenfranchised, like in Germany, it's like, well, the Jews have always been the easy target, and if we get rid of the Jews, then all of our problems go away. I don't know. I just
And we'll have a better life. That was the way it was in Germany. Their economy was not very good, and Hitler blamed it on the Jews, and the people were easily convinced. Get rid of the Jews and
Yep, we have one person in person in addition to me,
Hello.
Marvin.
Yeah, if you ever read Mein Kampf, which is what Hitler based all his hatred of Jews on, it basically states the Marxist position that in order to succeed, you need a common scapegoat. And according to Marx, he was also a rabid anti-Semite, even though he was Jewish. That was his philosophy. Exactly what you're saying there. Unite against a common enemy.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah.
I want to add two things. Oh, sorry, Ruby, and then I'll add.
Are there any writings that indicate that Ahasuerus had problems with the Jews, that there were uprisings, that there was reason for him to believe that they would be so negative? So that's what's confusing to me. I see them as a quiet people. So why this fear of them? Why this concern about
Well,
them?
Vivian is pointing out that the one who was in the king's court and is visibly not bowing down. I mean, we could pin the whole thing on Mordecai. It's possible. But I want to add, so we don't actually understand why anti-Semitism is like, I was taught once, I read this and it's always stayed with me, that anti-Semitism is an entity in and of itself. It almost like it has physical proportions, like an entity that God created or brought into the world, or the Satan brought into the world, and it's impossible to eradicate because it exists. It's like impossible to get rid of, which only makes sense to me because it is impossible and it rises up, century after century at different points and for different reasons, and gets camouflaged by other things. So this idea that it's unifying makes sense, and it made me think of something else. Two other things. One of them is, and I thought you were going that direction, and your direction was good too, but this is what it made me think of. If they're in every single province and the king is able to show his might in every single province saying, you'll never have an uprising, then every piece of his land is now seeing his might and his power. And the fact that he would never allow anyone to cross him. You know, not everybody knows out in the remote provinces that Mordechai didn't bow down to Haman. I don't know that they dafka knew that. I mean, yes, according to the letter, but we don't really know. But rather, all they hear is that the Jews, so then the king is able, because they're in every single province, he's like, oh, great idea. I don't care about the Jews. They're small, they're insignificant to me. It makes no difference. I might as well get rid of them. And I gain maybe a few things. I gain the fact that people unify around the rallying cry. I gain the fact that every single province gets to see my power. And I never thought of it that way. So I'm appreciating this discussion because I never thought of it. And I want to tell you something else. Somebody spoke to me this week. And he's like about my age, and might be retired even already, lives in West Hempstead, I think. And he said that he's been reading a book called Impossible Conversations. I totally have to get that book because he really recommended it. And it sounds like a good book. Mm-hmm. I've read a book called Difficult Conversations. Impossible feels more like what happens. He said what he's been reading in the book is that the way the Jews are trying to go about kind of convincing or speaking to the other side is completely useless, basically. Because the college campuses where people are swayed that nowadays students are socially isolated from COVID, they still have lost skills, A, and B, because of the way social networking works, people often feel very isolated from other people. But when there's a rallying cry, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to go, we're going to gather around them, and it makes them feel good to have place. The Jews are not saying, I'm not saying it would or wouldn't work at this point, but the Jews don't come with a rallying cry. That's just not the way it is. There's no anger. Let's kill all the Palestinians. I mean, that's not the way the Jews are doing the rallying cry, maybe about Hamas. A, and B, when you go to somebody and you say to them, you're wrong, like you're an idiot, basically, like you're not looking at facts, do you really think they're going to listen to you? You immediately shut them down. You made them feel stupid. All they're going to do is dig into their defensive positions. You're not actually going to get anywhere. So he's actually like pulling a group together. They're going to start to work according to this. It'd be very interesting. I don't know if he's going to start building bridges in his own area. I found that just fascinating. And I think that it made a lot of sense to me what he said. I don't know if a small group can do something. I said, please, keep me in mind when you start adding to this, halavai, it should be successful. But I'm really appreciating the thoughtfulness of why, because of Ruby's question. Thank you for asking the question, Ruby. Like, this doesn't make sense. So what reason could there be? And yet we see it in the text, right? It doesn't make sense, but it's in the text. So very clearly, I mean, that's why Purim came about, is because we were saved from being killed. So we know it happened. And you're saying, but why? So I think that we've come up with, in this group, a few ideas. Anything else somebody wants to add before we continue? And thank you for suggesting that we pause here. Yeah, Lance.
I have 2 points. One, I appreciate everything that everybody's been saying, and it makes a lot of sense. However, from the point of view of a professor of literature, you're dealing with a modest proposal by Jonathan Swift, totally exaggerated. In other words, what you're looking at, from my perspective anyway, is an attempt to attack Persians. And while it looks like it's anti-Semitic, we know from other contexts, for example, in Shakespeare, Shylock and Adolf Hitler fell into this trap, is the ultimate anti-Semite representative. However, the truth of the matter is, Shylock represented Puritans. And there's another Jew, the Jew of Malta, who represented Catholics.
1 second. So what you're saying, Lance, is that it's not about the Jewish people. That's what I'm hearing.
Right.
Okay.
And
I
so-
don't
so- but
see that
the
because
other-
it says there's one Am and they're from this dad, and it says Yehudim. So it's not clear to me how you do that, but that could be if that's your theory. I don't think we're gonna. I don't think most people,
Okay. I have
ascribe-
another theory, another quick
Yeah.
theory, and that is, you're looking at situation, for example, to show the what I call an extermination is an attempt, it's true, pure anti-Semitism. I mean, there's nobody behind that.
right.
But in terms of Hamas, what you're looking at, And in terms of Iran and in terms of the Taliban, you're looking at misogyny. And there's a man, a very wealthy man named Adam Tate. He is a very pro-Hamas, and he overtly considers himself a misogynist. He doesn't try to
Why
hide
don't
it.
you, yeah, I understand. So I don't really want to talk about the political situation now, though obviously it feels so relevant, but I'd be glad for you to drop into the chat a link so people can read about that. I appreciate that.
About which?
Yeah.
About Adam Tate?
Whatever you want, so people can see another point of view and then they can read it. I think that's very helpful when people have
Okay.
different points of view. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, I want to point out something else. Go back for a moment to verse 9 and compare what Haman asked Ahasuerus to do with what actually went into the letter in verse 13. Again, comparing verse 9, hi Judy, welcome, to verse 13. Hello, Milton. Hello, Carol. Verse 9 in chapter 3 to verse 13. What do we see is the difference between what Haman first asked Ahasuerus and what goes into the letter? Not a trick question. You just have to notice. Karen, did you want to say?
No, it looks like Haman, if I'm reading it correctly.
9, verse 9, yeah.
Yeah, is he's not saying he will do it. I will pay 10,000 silver.
Right, Yikatev means it will be written. That's correct.
Right.
That's not exactly what I was referring to, but we know he offered that to Ahasuerus. I'm asking the letter that was sent out. How does it differ from what Haman first asked from Ahasuerus? I want to posit that Haman asked for A, but the letter doesn't feel like A. It feels different. Does anybody notice? Ooh, somebody's eating matzah. Save some for Pesach Sheni.
Which chapter is it?
We're in chapter 3, verse 9,
Verse 9, yes.
verse 9 versus verse 13. In the same chapter, we just read it a couple minutes ago. A few minutes ago. So, I mean, I can tell you it's not, I'm not trying to trick you. He says it should be written le'abdam, to kill them. But then Ahasuerus says to him, oh, do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. So all of a sudden, it explodes. It's not just le'abdam. It says lahashmid, to destroy, laharog, to kill, ule'abed, and to commit genocide, basically. Like, what happens when you supersize your words? What feeling? I mean, of course, they're all mean to kill. But look at the difference between the three. Like, as soon as he was given permission, it got even bigger in his head. That's what I wanted to say. Just wanted to point that out to you. Okay, so it sends everything to kill all the Jews, minar zaken, from the youngest to the oldest, taf v'nashim, children and women, b'yom achad, on one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month. The 12th month is Adar, right? We just said Nisan is the first one. So Adar is always the last one, the 12th month, and to take their property as spoil. So what would you like to say about that? First of all, I have a question. Why on one day? Any thoughts?
Work everybody up. If you just say, kill them, people will do it when they get around to it.
Right, like foaming at the mouth, like, go get him, go get him. But this day, putting out big posters. This is the day, this is the heart. Yeah, right. I agree. It's really hard also that they felt that older people who are clearly not going to be doing, I mean, how much really, Zaken is elders. And then Taf v'nashim, children and women who generally are not part of army. It's really,
The hostages.
really is genocide. Yeah.
It's the hostages.
And the host, yeah.
Old,
Right,
young,
made no difference. Children,
no
babies,
difference.
no difference. Just
Things
Jewish.
have not
You're
changed.
Jewish, you deserve to be killed or to be taken hostage or to be used as, right?
Pawns, yeah.
Yeah, or to use as pawns, exactly. Okay, Milton, and then Robert. Sorry, I didn't see who raised their hand first. You're muted, Milton. You're muted. You're muted. Tra-la-la-la-la-la.
Robert.
He's working on it.
Well, to be
Okay, Robert, you go first and Milton will unmute in the meantime. Yeah.
all in one day would be an overwhelming a coup. Would be an overwhelming force. Would not allow any if there were survivors, would not allow them to respond in any meaningful way.
Mm. Wow. Ay, so sad. Milton?
There was no social media.
Yeah.
Well, that's very important because if there was no social media, how does the rest of the population really get into this? You have to do it fast if you're going to do it
Oh, got it.
before there's opposition that could form.
Uh-huh. Yeah, which is a little bit what Robert was saying, right? Thank you. Yep. That's great. I mean, that's not great, but it's great interpretation.
But how did word get out for the people to do it then?
Well, that
how did-
said, they sent runners to all the king's provinces. That's what it says, that they sent here. The scribes were called, they were written, they sent out letters to every single province in their language, in their writing, and they had many months to do it. It doesn't matter if it took the runners weeks or months because they had 11 months. They did it in the Nisan for the following year for Adar. That's how they did it. That's how they did it. They literally sent out people. Okay, 14, anybody else? Did I miss someone? No, okay. 14, י"ד, פתשגן הכתב להינתן דת בכל מדינה ומדינה, גלוי לכל עמים להיות עתידים ליום הזה. The copy was for an edict to be given in every province, published to all the peoples. They should be ready for that day. That really, I never really read every word like this. I mean, I've learned it, but I never thought about every word. Liot atim, you got to be ready for that day. Again, working everybody up for that day. So once that was done in 15, haratzim, the runners, yetzu dechufim, the chuf means urgent. So they went out with speed. Bidvar hamelech v'adat nitna b'shushan habira. And this edict or this rule or this law, that means religion, was given in Shushan Habira, in the capital city of Shushan. V'hamelech v'Haman yashvu lishtot. The king and Haman sat down to drink. What were they drinking? Why were they drinking? Why were they sitting like this? They're drinking, toasting. We did it. We did it. Va'ir, celebrating, exactly. Va'ir Shushan Navocha. Now, it's a really interesting word, Navocha, because Navoch can mean a few different things. I'm actually going to, no, I'm not, because I don't have my phone. I was going to look up in Morphix what Navoch. Somebody is Navoch could mean they're confused. It could mean they're perplexed. It could mean they don't know what to say. They're like tongue-tied, dumbfounded, all of those words, but it's kind of negative, I would say. Navoch. I like confused, like don't know what to do, you know, perplexed, confused, bemused. I don't know. There's different ways to translate it. Let me just see if anybody else has a different, well, you'll have to open up morphix.co.il. I actually have that. It doesn't matter. If somebody has Morphix, you can look it up. I have it, but I left my phone in the office. Apologies.
But bewildered.
Bewildered. Yeah, but it's
Maybe what had
stronger.
happened was that the Jews took some important roles over there in their cities. Maybe they were the storekeepers. Maybe they were the ones who provided things for the people and everything. And now that the Jews were being destroyed, they had nowhere to get these things and nowhere to live their normal lives.
Wait, who is they? Who is
Everyone
they?
got very
Vivian.
that
Vivian, who is they?
they means the non-Jewish people there.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So I think what you're saying, Vivian.
Navocha, that means the whole city got crazy.
Correct.
It doesn't say the Jews. It
Correct.
says here.
Nice.
Everybody.
I
So
didn't
that
notice that
America
till I was
got
reading
all the
it.
sugar.
Yes,
They
yes,
didn't know
yes,
how to
yes.
get what they needed, and they didn't want all that.
Terrific reading. That was
Yeah.
an excellent reading,
As a
Vivian.
matter
I
of
never,
fact, I want to admit something. I once
Yeah.
did a dissertation on what the role of the Jews was in the various countries of Europe.
Wow.
And it appears that before all the anti-Semitism, before the Germans got into power, before that,
Yeah.
that they were very important and people looked forward to them. 'Cause they were
Amazing.
business people. They brought things from the Far East, and where
Yep.
where would the
Traders,
British
right? They were
get
traders.
where would the British get their fabrics in order to make their clothing and the other things in their Industrial Revolution? They got them all from the Jews. And during that period, the Jews were very popular and they needed them, and they probably could not function without them. So it could have happened the same thing over here. They look forward to the Jews taking care of certain things, having their stores, having this and that. And when the Jews weren't there with all these products, they were lost. They didn't know what to do.
Thank you, Vivian. I think that that is just really sharp and brilliant to bring that in. I never noticed that before either when I was preparing this last night. I just never thought, I thought Ha'ir Shushan Navocha, meaning there was a pall over the city, the Jews were sad. I don't know, that's what I always thought. I never thought more deeply than that until I started reading it. But I want to remind people, remember we had a midrash, if you remember. Remember, sometimes it says Shushan Habira, and sometimes it says Ha'ir Shushan. And we said Shushan Habira is the capital city of Shushan. Remember we said with capital S, and the city of Shushan, Ha'ir Shushan is small s, which I love. I thought that was a really nice way to notice when you're learning the Megillah. So in the Shushan Habira, we said Jews didn't usually come there. They weren't actually allowed, that Mordechai was an exception. Again, this is one of the midrashim. I understand that. So you could argue with me, but I'm just taking one interpretation. So Ha'ir Shushan Navocha, I kind of always thought this was like the group of Jews who were there. But what Vivian is saying is actually, maybe it's not even the Jews who were Navoch. I mean, the Jews were aghast. The Jews were grieving. The Jews were in mourning. We're going to see in the next pasuk that Mordechai and everybody are rending. Did I say you to rend? Rent their garments, but I don't know how you say it in the present tense. They're tearing their garments, they're putting sackcloth, they're putting ashes because they're in mourning. But the word navocha is not describing the Jews. And I think, Vivian, that's like just amazing and really insightful. And I can imagine that people are like, why? Why is Achashverosh doing this? Why do we have this edict? What's going to happen in Adar? Of course, we're going to do it because let's rally around as if like, is nobody thinking about the consequences of this?
So I like Vivian's approach, but do we have any evidence
Yes.
that the
Yes, there's
Persians
a lot of
were?
evidence.
Wait,
We-
one second, Vivian, 1 second. That
No.
what?
No, do we have any evidence that the Persians were going to feel,
Yeah.
what are we going to do with our lives? The
Yeah.
Jews, maybe Vivian can answer that.
Yes, a lot of my previous life is coming into this discussion, because when I was in Dropsy University in Philadelphia, I did a doctoral dissertation on the lives of the Jews in this ancient period, and I learned through my studies of Jews and non-Jews, and their stories of what they did and how they bought things that they brought in, and the lives of the non-Jews were really dependent on the Jews who were able to travel. Now, in those days, there were no hotels, but the Jews always had a place to go. when They
Exactly.
traveled.
I read
Where
about
did
that
they
also.
go? They went to the shul. In the shul, they were able to get kosher food,
Yeah.
and they had people who would uh,
Hospitality.
send them to the right places where they would be able to buy things.
By the way, as
and
what
for
happens
things.
today, Vivian, as what happens
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
I don't know how many
And
times
they
people,
were
1 second.
able even, they were able even to speak the same language.
Correct, yes,
Because they all davened, and they would speak the davening
a
language
little bit, yeah,
from
yeah.
one to another, and they'd be able to communicate and all, and they were able to go from city to city. How did they survive going to India? I mean, really, or to China, or to other places, and those are the places they went, and they brought back the goods and things, and all kinds of stuff that could be sold that they were waiting for. The non-Jews were waiting for them to come back and bring all this and
Thank
bring it to
you.
the market, and they could buy it and all. And
Yep. Thank you, Vivian. That's a
this
very good, thank you
history.
for describing it that way. And I want to say, let's remember, we're taking this partly, of course, from the history, and everything you said is what I've read as well. That is one of the main reasons why Jews became traders and because they always had connections everywhere they went. Oh, you're Jewish. Okay. You're acceptable to me. I trust you. But look at these 3 words. It doesn't say. Remember, it said la'abed et kol haYehudim. So they know, the Megillah knows that there are Jews and calls them by name. So maybe it should have said v'haYehudim hayu nivochim, that the Jews were perplexed, confounded, dumbfounded, confused. That's not what it says. It
No.
says v'ha'ir Shushan navocha. And I want to say that's how midrashim are born. When they see something, and you just wrote a midrash right there, basically, Vivian. Not the first time, by the way. She's written other midrashim. So basically, you take words that don't really make sense in the context, and then you say, well, how can we explain it in a way that'll make sense? And actually, look, we don't know for sure, but it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. It fits the narrative. It fits the narrative of history, geography, culture. Anyway, so okay, so 1 second. There are other midrashim that don't make as much sense to me. But here's one that's more of an anti-Semitic way of saying it. So speaking of this wasn't so much anti-Semitism, by the way, what Vivian was saying. It was more like, right, but so there's the Manot Levi says, and there are many midrashim on these 3 words. While the Jews were wailing and crying bitterly, the non-Jews were shouting with joy. There was such tumult in the city that it was hard to distinguish between the cries of mourning and the screams for joy. So if we look at it from a lens of anti-Semitism, then Navocha is different. Then it's about, there was yelling, there were demonstrations everywhere. There were Jews demonstrating mourning or just mourning, and there were non-Jews who were saying, kill the Jews. Yay. So that's another midrash, and these are midrashim that people wrote. So
do you have access to Rashi? Because my art scroll here says the Jews within the city, that is, and then in parentheses Rashi.
So that's another interpretation.
Rashi often explains things in ancient French. If you read Rashi.
No, but what Rashi, right, and what Rashi is saying here is that it's not that the city of Shushan was Navoch, but it's the Jews within the city, which is also,
Okay.
by the way, that's also a midrashic interpretation. Why is it
right,
midrashic?
which Rashi does.
Right, if he feels that that's the best fit, right? When we
Right.
say pshat of Rashi, we mean the best fit. So I want to remind people what my granddaughter, who's about to have a bat mitzvah, the way she, 1 second, Vivian, that the way she explained what a midrash is, anybody remember? I said this at the beginning of our class, that a midrash is when you explain the pasuk but the words aren't in the pasuk. You explain the pasuk, but the words aren't there. So it doesn't say the Yehudim betoch ir Shushan navocha, right? It doesn't say that the Jews within the city of Shushan, but he says, well, that makes sense. I mean, who was Navoch? It could have been, must be the Jews. So
Yeah.
all of these explanations make sense.
Mhm.
And there are more. I'm not reading all of them, but now you understand where it comes from. I wanted to add a thought before we go. We'll start with chapter 4 next time. Yes, Carol. Hi,
I
Carol.
just wanted
I
to
had
say-
another.
Wait, 1 second, Vivian. Vivian, 1 second, Vivian. Yeah,
I-
Carol.
It could also be that there were other minority groups within the city. And they're thinking, okay, what's going on with the Jews? Are they then going to start turning on us?
Amazing. That's it. Yep. That makes sense. What did you want to add, Vivian? Just quickly, because I wanted to, well, whatever. Say whatever you want to say. Yeah. Vivian. Oh, wait, Anne also. So Vivian and then Anne.
I was just going to bring up, if you read Rashi, he had his own Beis Midrash, and he was teaching, and sometimes he was trying to explain in Hebrew and all, and they didn't understand. And then he would put in the loazit, that means in
Yeah.
a foreign language, and
Yeah.
the loazit was always French.
Right. Old
But
French.
He lived in
Yeah, but
France.
I don't think
And
that's
he-
what it was here, Vivian.
Was that?
I don't think that what Karen brought,
Just using that as an example.
correct.
That
Yeah.
the Jews were involved in the economy of the entire
Mhm.
area,
Got
not
it,
just
got it.
their own area.
Oh,
With
interesting.
the non-Jews too. And when he explained in French, he didn't need that for the Jews. He made that for the non-Jews. It was
Ah,
in loazit, it was in French. So he was explaining it so that the French people would understand it. And
wow.
so the Jews and the non-Jews were intertwined in their business events and everything, and he wanted to make sure that everybody was knowledgeable of what was happening.
Thank
So
you.
So maybe, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So maybe the Jews around the world, especially in Europe and in America, where I see the deafening silence of the Christians in America, instead of the Jews trying to defend themselves against all these crazy protests sweeping around the world, maybe we need to start saying to the non-Jewish world, if you eradicate us again, your economy is going to tank. In America and elsewhere else, if you push every Jew out of Europe and America back to Israel, what's going to be left here, Judenrein of America or Europe? And it just only brings out more anti-Semitism in the non-Jewish world. Where are they going to stand? I just want to throw that out if anybody has a thought on that, because I've been watching the deafening silence of the 57 million born again Christians in America. Like, where are they not coming to defend the Jews?
Judy, and then I think we'll close. Unmute, Judy.
You can hear me, you don't have to see me. Well, first of all, in response to what you're saying about the Christians, there is a group of Christians who are very pro-Israel. They go to Israel, they work in the farms, help out in every way. They've donated ambulances and very, very active. That's one point. The other point about Ha'ir Shushan Navocha, I wonder if we can compare that to current times with the Gazans. That some of the Gazans, they don't know, should they be with Hamas, should they be against Hamas? And it's all such a navochness.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's also really, yeah, that's a good comparison. The last thing I want to tell you is, it's just so interesting. I read this in a different book, that chapter 3 repeats a lot of the themes. I'm sorry, we won't have time, Lance, because we're out of time.
I just want to go to the chat.
I haven't finished. Yeah, in the chat.
Just
Yeah, yeah.
go to the chat. You
Yeah,
asked me to
yeah.
put it in the chat. I
Oh,
put it
no,
right
I saw it was in the chat. Did people notice it was in the chat? Yeah, we all saw it was in the chat. Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate
that's
that.
all I need.
Okay, no problem. So there were similarities in chapter 3 to chapter 1, which I also like, it was brilliant. Like, for example, The king was full of chema. Remember, he was very angry when Vashti didn't listen to him. And Haman was very angry when Mordechai defied him. And then the word vayivez, meaning that there was contempt from the king felt contempt and Haman felt contempt. The refusal to obey, Vashti to Ahasuerus, Mordechai to Haman. Punishment, Vashti was banished, kill the Jews. Personal anger being applied to a group. So what happens in chapter 1? Personal anger against one woman gets applied to all women, that they all have to listen to their husbands. Like, that's an amazing comparison. And then Mordechai being applied to the group of Jews, and letters were sent out. Remember, letters were sent out in chapter 1 as well to all the provinces that you all have to listen to your husbands and you have to speak his language, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And here there were letters sent out as well about killing the Jews. So that's just a thought, not the focus, but just another way of reading Megillat Esther and seeing the literary comparisons. It's a little bit like foreshadowing. I'm not sure what else, but I'll leave us with a literary comparison instead of deep in the trenches of anti-Semitism, because this is so difficult. I just want to thank everybody for the thoughtfulness of what everybody brought here. You know, I prepare, but you bring so much more depth and breadth, and I really appreciate that. I want to thank everybody for coming on. Again, you're invited tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock if you want on Zoom to hear some songs, Israeli songs, and to do a deep dive into them if you wish. And come back next Wednesday. We'll do one more on Megillat Esther, and we'll continue with we're not rushing. We don't need to rush. It's unfortunately always relevant, and we all know the story, so it's very easy to pick it up. It's not like Yeshayahu, Isaiah, like, I don't remember what he did last time. It was all ranting. And, this is a story, so it's a little easier to pick it up. So I really just thank everybody for coming.
Great class, really
Thank
great
you.
class,
Thank you
very
so much.
enlightening, very
Thank
enlightening.
you.
Really
Rabbi
really
Brooke. This was
timely.
very stimulating. Thank you.
Very.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Take good care. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.